This issue of opportunity zones is one that every city leader around America is interested in. You know, what is it? How do you apply it? Can it work in my community? How's it going to change my city? What are those tools that we can use in order to make sure that when it comes to my city, you know, we got 8,700 designated throughout America, who's really going to participate, and will the people that it really impacts, will it help their lives? And I think that today we have a panel that can answer all of those questions, and they may even have more questions for you. Now, the other part is at some point I'm going to turn to the audience, and I think it's important that we provide an opportunity for you, the mayors, and the staff leaders here to also ask questions. So I'm going to get right into the panel here today, and you've got the introduction already. Nia is a local, so she knows her way around here, and Korb as well as Ann. So we're going to get right into it. But for all of you, from where you sit, can you provide a brief overview of opportunity zones and how they can be used to benefit communities? Korb, you want to start first?
Thank you all. Pleasure to be here with you all today. Again, Court Maxwell. I'm a shareholder here at Polsinelli. Polsinelli is an AmLaw 100 law firm that is based here out of Kansas City. We have about 875 attorneys. We have 26 offices across the rest of the United States, but our home base is here in Kansas City. And prior to 18 months ago, I was a real estate development attorney. I was showing up in front of city governments and city halls and working on zoning, land use, and planning issues and public-private partnerships, sort of all throughout the Midwest, and sometimes following my clients even further than that to the jurisdictions, some of your all's jurisdictions out there to help them. And I said about 18 months ago because 18 months ago we had tax reform, and as I was reading tax reform just a few days after that, I ran into this concept of opportunity zones, and I got unbelievably excited about it. Truly, just that first time of reading the law and seeing this, I was just shocked. I was stunned. I thought this would truly change America, and was very excited to be a part of it. And I just started cold calling folks in Washington, D.C. I started cold calling the EIG group. I started cold calling Sean Parker and others, and any of those folks, because I wanted to be a part of it, and I wanted our firm to be a part of it. And from that, we've formed a group of about 30 attorneys. I'm the chair of the group, and we work on this every day. And one of the parts that I would say is, though there's a lot of conferences like this and others happening across the United States every day on this topic. I mean, you can get overwhelmed by going to conferences and talking about OZs out there, but I think a lot of people have been skeptical is it all just talk, or is it actually happening? And that's the part that I really wanted to bring forward, is that this is not just talk, right? We are doing deals and doing them weekly. I think people are always amazed when I say that across our platform now, we are closing about one OZ deal a week, and that's happened since the 1st of January. So these are deals, and we can go into this further as the panel goes on, these are deals that were generally on the board prior to OZs that were already sort of out there, and that's partly because of the long time period it takes to entitle projects and work through those. So I don't think these projects would be ones that weren't going to happen but for OZs yet, those ones that we've already closed and have done. But I do think there's characteristics of these deals where they've grown in size, they've grown in scope, they've grown in complexity, they've maybe pushed their timeline forward for doing multiple phases of it, all very sort of positive components from the law. And I think there's also that we're now in the phase of planning those next projects that likely wouldn't have occurred but for OZs. And I think that's sort of the next exciting component out there. If anybody wants a real brief primer on, just walking through the numerical analysis of what the benefits of OZs are, I'll do it really quick because I'm sure this audience has heard it many times, but the first benefit is a long-term deferral. If you had a capital gain event, a liquidity event, the first one is if you put it in an OZ fund instead of paying federal, and in most states, state tax or city tax, not all states, but in most, that you get that long-term deferral till 12/31/2026. The second is if you get in early enough here and you're in the zone for 5 or 7 years before that investment period hits, you get a step up in basis that lowers your tax when you pay tax in 2027. And then the final benefit that I think everybody has heard the most about and knows the most about, and is what's creating the froth in the market and the environment, is that if you are in an investment, you're in your fund that's down in deals, and you're in that for 10 years, you have a complete tax-free exit on the appreciation of the investment. That all adds up to about 100, and if you take advantage of all of it, it adds up to about 150% additional return when compared to just using fresh equity or ordinary income in a deal. So that can, boost your deal about 150%, and probably went over my time, but happy to dive into any of those with the rest of the panelists or anybody else.
Ann?
In terms of how opportunity zones can help entrepreneurship in cities, I think there are obvious benefits for high net worth individuals who can put away capital for 10 years or in order to take advantage of all of the things that Korb mentioned. In my own practice in Detroit, I teach a transactional law clinic at Wayne State University where we provide free legal services to low-income entrepreneurs and social enterprises and community organizations. These organizations, in my experience, have not yet been the beneficiaries of opportunity zones. They're not, time will tell, of course, whether or not that will trickle down. But in my experience, the beneficiaries are really individuals who have more capital and are able to, invest that in enterprises that, provide a more certain gain. And in a market like Detroit, where, we're just trying to make sure that our residential real estate market or commercial property market functions, with or without opportunity zones, putting away money in an investment that is illiquid for 10 years, presents a lot of challenges with respect to equity and inclusiveness. So I think the benefits for people across the board are still a little bit uncertain.
Nia?
So repeat the question.
From
I'm trying to think of how to answer this.
Yes, from your perspective in your role working for the city, okay. How do you see the community benefiting from the investment opportunities associated with opportunity zones?
Okay, so I'm native to Kansas City, but I am new to the city of Kansas City, so I'm usually on the other side, so I have to kind of watch myself. I'm still on probation. I'm just trying not to get fired. So from my perspective and the conversations that I've been in about opportunity zones, I have yet to see the benefit for people who look like me, particularly in my community. I was born and raised on the east side. It's pretty much where black folks stay in Kansas City. The most popular street now of conversation is Prospect. I was born on Prospect. I'm a product of this city. And I've been in conversations, sensitive conversations, and I feel like maybe I've kind of went into debate with individuals who, they come with these great ideas, they use a lot of buzzwords, but when I ask the question, okay, can you be more specific? How does this benefit me? Because it sounds like it's more of an opportunity for the investor and not for people who look like me, the businesses in my community, the people in my community. And it's a scary thought to think that this could really be putting gentrification and displacement on steroids, because I don't see the opportunity for us. And I was literally in a conversation, and we won't say what organization and who they brought, but we went back and forth, and, I said, well, it's kind of like, a coin. It's double-sided. You got the investors, you got the community on one side. He was like, yeah, I got to go for the investors. I said, well, when are you going to think about us? What about us, the community? But not for me, you would not have an opportunity zone. So when is the opportunity going to be for me? So find me the conscious investor who is not really looking to make a gain, but looking to do something in a community that they could not do before. And this is just an extra carrot for them to actually be able to do that, because it's not about making the money and doing these, putting more in your pocket. Show me how I can put more in the pocket of the people that are in this zone and help close that racial wealth gap that we have right now. Because from what I know and with the statistics that I see right now, the latest report showed that by 2052, the median white family will have $174,000 of wealth. The Latino family will have about $8,600. The black family will have $600. And by 2082, black people are the only race in line to having zero or negative wealth. And if that does not scare you, especially as a person of color, then there's a problem. And if you can't show me how this opportunity can help close that gap and put the money in the pockets of the people and teach them investments, then I don't see how this is an opportunity for me. It's an opportunity for them.
So let me follow up on that for all of the panelists. We talk about the designation and if, let's assume that small businesses, minority-owned businesses in opportunity zones, the concept is they're supposed to prosper as well. How can we develop policies and programs so that that can happen? What's your idea on that?
I had a conversation about that with a gentleman who was really trying to help me dissect what Opportunity Zone was, and one of the challenges that we saw. So before coming to the city, I worked for my father, who has one of the only black-owned and operated civil and structural engineering businesses in Kansas City. So I did a lot of the work for him around marketing, business development, so I got to learn a lot about procurement and that procurement process, and that's a lot of the knowledge that I'm bringing over here to the city to give a perspective from the other side. And one of the things that came up is someone like my father probably would not want to give up equity into his business, because as being certified as a minority business, now the shareholders have to give up their information, and what is the likelihood that they'll do that? So let's visit that policy. Is there a temporary hold that we can put on that, or something that, during this time period that would make it easier for us to get an investor to want to do something like that? And then also, I don't know how many businesses I can count just on one hand who would be willing to give up that type of equity, who are doing your everyday type professional services. Now, your startups, it's almost like they're built for that. And again, I come from the procurement side. The startup world is very new to me. Ecosystems, that's a village. That's a pipeline. Founder, sounds like a CEO or president. We just use different terminology, right? But we're talking about the same thing. And so it depends on the type of business, and then that's where it gets a little tricky. And then again, we can dig deeper into what policies we can do to change that. But that was just one example.
Great.
Your certification.
And any thoughts on that and how small businesses, and as well as
Yeah, in Detroit, something that has gained a lot of traction is the concept of community benefits agreements. Detroit is the nation's first city with a community benefits ordinance. A community benefits ordinance is an ordinance that requires developments exceeding a certain dollar amount threshold to actually require the developer to engage with the community in a process to hear what the community's concerns are about that development and provide solutions, or at least address, how they might mitigate some of the community's concerns. So that passed in 2016 in Detroit. It's a weaker form of the ordinance than was originally proposed, and so there, of course, are problems, and some of the results have been uneven. But the various entities that have been subject to the community benefits ordinance include Ford Motor Company, who is redeveloping Michigan Central Station, which is a sort of famous landmark in Detroit that was abandoned for a really long time, and now they're going to be putting their autonomous vehicle operations in that landmark. The Pistons practice facility, various real estate developments have been subject to it, and so community benefits agreements can be a way to at least allow there to be some engagement, because the trigger for the community benefits ordinance to come into play is the receipt of some sort of incentive, whether it's a property tax abatement, whether it is receiving underpriced land from the city. And so perhaps if community benefits agreements could be connected to opportunity zone benefits, that might be one way for the community to have more of a stake.
Corey, in your experience, and you're saying that you're closing these deals, how are those deals engaging the small businesses that are in the districts, in the zones that you are working with?
They're not.
Okay.
They're not, right? But I don't think that's a damning criticism of the program, right? We're 18 months in. We just got our second round of guidance that actually even was the first step of clearing the way for actual operating companies 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, right? Before that time, what the deals that are happening across the country right now that are occurring, I believe that we have a pretty good sample of this, and from others that are actually practicing in the area, we're doing straight down the middle of the fairway real estate development projects, right? Those were sort of the first movers. Those were the easiest to get done. They're the easiest to get done because for the most part, one, real estate stays in its place, right? It doesn't get up and go somewhere else. Two, it's easy to have geographic-based incentives around real estate. Three, real estate developers, by their sort of nature, are cowboys, right? They're used to using incentives. They're used to working with government. They're used to this type of capital. Of course, they would sort of be first movers in all of this, but it's also that the program works really well for it. So we're out doing real estate deals across the country. So we're not engaging sort of local entrepreneurs and others out there at this point. We're talking about it at lots of events like that, but we only just sort of got this first round of, or this second round that really paved the way for being able to do it for operating company investments. So I believe this next will begin to occur. But I think the interesting thing about this program, and it's been hard, I think, for all of us that are around local government and even state governments and otherwise, is after we got the framework of the program going and everything designated, we're having to look and work and try to find what is that local role, or what is that sort of connectivity that's going to happen in our natural standpoints, right? Because when you look at just the base of the program, this really is about equity and high net worth individuals bringing in equity to deals, and then the real estate developer or the entrepreneur that wants that lower cost of equity, right? If we're going to go use other incentives or community benefit agreements or other things like that, then yes, we're going to involve cities and local governments, or if we need help with permitting processes and otherwise, we're going to come to you in all your natural role. But outside of that, I mean, for the true functioning of the program, government, sort of state government and city government, is on the outside looking in, right? This is private investor capital that's being put into either local deals, and particularly if it's operating company deals out there. So that's a long way of saying, Clarence, no, we're not engaging the community at this point right now. What we're trying to do is actually build a market, figure out equity pricing, figure out deals that work, figure out the structuring, and get this thing going and off the ground. But I don't think that what's happened over the first 18 months means that this is where the program's going to be for the whole period of time. And, I would go a little bit in the opposite of some of the other panelists and otherwise is we spend a lot of time talking about gentrification at these conferences, right? And I absolutely believe that is a real issue and something we have to keep our eye on. But at the other side of this, the whole fundamental reason we've done this program, right, that Congress took this action, was because these communities aren't getting investment. It's not that they're getting too much investment and we're tossing people out. It's that they're not getting any investment, right? That we've got to change something. We've got to do something different if the stats that Nia cited aren't going to be sort of how this is all going to turn out in 50 and 80 years, right? We have to go and invest in, historically underrepresented or capitalized African American communities like Prospect, right? That's what this was about, was trying to do things like that. So I'm obviously a huge evangelist for the program, and we'll probably find some debate in it all with my thoughts and ideas on it. But I get the gentrification argument. It's definitely something to watch. But we got to do something different than what we've been doing, and this at least gives us a shot.
No, I have to tell you, I appreciate your candor, because that's what the leaders in this room need to hear. I do think, though, the question becomes the asset that is being invested in. There are people that are associated with that asset. It surprises me that you've not had challenges in moving those shovel-ready projects without engaging the community assets that are there. Have you seen that as a challenge?
Yeah, I would say, Clarence, again, kind of to the deals they were deals that were on the board already,
right,
that had generally sort of gone through the local zoning process, the local permitting process, the local entitlement process. So all of the normal sort of engagement that we have as cities, as the regulatory body, and developers trying to move them forward, that was occurring and that was happening. But I'll also be really frank as well, is that the deals that are happening today, and again, I don't think this is a damning criticism, right? It's just the truth. The deals that are happening today are the deals that are in the very, very, very best zones in America, right? We're going and doing deals in the Pearl District. We're doing deals in Salt Lake City. We're doing deals in Scottsdale. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's deals happening all across the United States, but those sort of best zones that rank the highest out there, those are the ones that are seeing investment. But it's sort of natural, right? That the zones that are having growth fundamentals behind them, that people have to go out on a limb and take these first mover risks, of course capital's gonna move to the easiest places to go do deals. But those sort of things that we learn from those deals are where we can go and apply it to all of the other cities across America. And I think this is an important component of these first steps we're taking towards getting more broader and wider acceptance that we're moving into other communities as well.
And to recognize it candidly, I mean, it's written in a way to say that you don't have to live in the district to invest, work. You can get your capital right off if you live in New York and investing in Kansas City, Missouri. So it is designed in a way that you really don't have to live, work, or play. But so, Nia, I can tell you.
You're looking at me.
You grab your microphone, so I just want to go ahead and because I don't think this panel is going to have a problem jumping in. So go ahead. I think the question around how do you drive and maintain and make sure that gentrification and displacement does not occur, how do you do that with what Korb is talking about?
I mean, it's kind of heartening to hear someone who does not live with me, look like me, tell me what I need. I don't need you to save me. Yes, we have been disinvested, but doing the same stuff that has got me that disinvestment is not going to help me. You want to do something different? Put it in my hands. Something that I've seen that I would love to see in Kansas City, and hopefully I don't give it away too much and everybody starts running towards it and I don't get a chance to get it. I had a colleague of mine send me an article in Portland, Oregon. They have this thing called a community investment trust. And a community investment trust is very similar to a REIT. They found some loopholes in it. A REIT, you got to have $50,000 at the table. It's pretty much an investment club. But with a community investment trust, you can have anywhere from $10,000 to $1,000. And in Portland, they said, okay, we're going to get the communities in these different area codes. And ironically, the community that they chose that they were working with was a displaced community, a predominantly African-American community. And they said, okay, we're going to get together. Not only are we going to teach you investment, because you cannot be a shareholder unless you have learned how to invest, because that is something my community lacks greatly of. Now I'm going to show you how to actually do the investment. And so what they did was they took a overarching organization called Mercy Corp. They had 2 big investors. Now, here's how the investors can play along in our game. And they had the community residents invest into it. And I think the first year they bought a property. It was about 60% occupied at the time. I can't remember how many pieces were, any of the spaces that were in it. But in the first year, I think they had somewhere about 18, 19 resident investors. They saw a 9% dividend. And then after that year, people got excited, so they started jumping into it. And from there on out, now these people are not only learning investment, they are actually investing, and they own property or assets in their community. If your investors come and buy everything from me, then what the hell do I have? I don't have anything. You see what I'm saying? Don't give me face. We're just debating. We're just debating. We can still be friends. I don't have anything. And gentrification displacements happen when you take it from me. And I can't hold on. I can't keep up. I don't have the job that can compare to what you make because the opportunities are not there for me. So let me create my own. And so when you give it and put it in the hands of the people, you focus on the human capital of this area, then you can see some real results. But if you keep doing the same thing, I think that's called insanity because you're not getting any different results.
Okay,
correct?
so Nia, from my perspective, and I've put my cards down because y'all done went off. So
Oh no. We're having a panel discussion.
Nia has proposed a capital structure that could be used in an opportunity zone concept for managing the engagement of the citizens. And any thoughts of ideas that you think could make sure that people that are in the community participate in opportunity zone success?
Yeah, perhaps it's fitting that I'm sitting between Korb and Nia unintentionally. But what I'd really like to see, and what I was talking about with Korb before the panel started, was maybe there are some opportunities to do side-by-side investments where the opportunity zone investors can maybe provide seed capital, large amounts of capital, especially depending on the nature of the enterprise or development, necessitating a large amount of capital, but ensuring that alongside that investment, there are opportunities for community wealth building, whether that's through crowdfunding, whether that's through a direct public offering. I mean, so much legwork and financial diligence is going to be taking place anyway. Why not use those efforts to also extend opportunities to community members to participate in that. Now, that being said, there are still some roadblocks to offering participation from an equity perspective to the community. Securities regulations, but also just plain and simple a secondary market. People are going to need to get their money out to pay for, I don't know, a new car or medical expenses or something like that. If they're invested in a local business, how are they going to get out? There have been some ideas toyed around with local stock exchanges that provide liquidity at a local level. Lancaster, Pennsylvania toyed with this idea called LanX. Ultimately, it didn't go anywhere, not because there wasn't interest. They were happening to explore the idea around the same time that crowdfunding came out. So I think sort of the buzz shifted to crowdfunding. But the idea in Lancaster was that it's an 8-county region. That's 2 million people, a $60 billion GDP for the area. That's the same size as the country of Slovakia, which has its own stock exchange. There's no reason why a local stock exchange couldn't work. Other than, of course, real hurdles with respect to getting exemptions from the SEC to operate a local stock exchange. But, we previously had impediments with respect to trading in securities of private companies that we're seeing overcome now. There are, NASDAQ private markets is something that facilitates the trading in securities of private companies. That being said, that's a platform that's only available to companies that I think have $50 million. No, I'm thinking of EquityZen, which is another private company trading platform. You've got to have a company side that has a minimum market cap of $50 million. Yeah. So, if we can create platforms for community investors to actually not only invest in local companies, but then also be able to get out their investment, that might be a way to maybe have the best of both worlds. Something for the opportunity zone, high net worth investors, but also the community members who need to participate in these investments in order for it to be equitable and inclusive.
Korb, any additional thoughts in terms of capital structures?
I think that the models will come about over time. I think that what we're talking about here is interesting and important and can play a role in the process. But I think we shouldn't lose sight of just how complex this is and just how many securities laws and just how complex these investments are and how illiquid these investments are. And that's a little scary from sort of both sides. One, asking people to put their money into deals that are going to be locked up for 10 years and highly illiquid out there. And then on the other side of it, having sort of unaccredited investors in your deals too, on the other side too, is scary. So I think this all can evolve, but I will be really frank again, if I'm just giving candid, we're talking here about 1 or 2% of the market. We're going to move $100 billion with this program. Those types of structures we just talked about, those are hundreds of millions of dollars if all of us are massively successful here. This program is going to be made on the corporations in America, the ultra high net worth individuals in America that are investing with this tax benefit, and they are bringing lower cost equity into these neighborhoods. That's what it's about.
Let me ask you to put yourself, all three of you, in the position as mayors. You got a mayoral election here in Kansas City, Missouri. It was about 100 people ran for mayor when Sly announced he was retiring. But, all right, so if you were the mayor, how would you balance investor interest, developer interest, and community need? What would you, you're the mayor now.
Yeah, pretty easy. First, you guys all recognize I come from just a pure real estate development background and I like to build stuff, right? So I don't think a lot of deep policy thoughts the way this room does. I like to go build stuff. So what would I do if I was the mayor? I would absolutely take down every regulatory burden I possibly could to make it as easy as possible to have as much capital flow into these zones and change my city when I have the shot, right? I would go out and be the #1 salesperson.
What about again, you got the capital market concept created. You got the investment developer. How do you make sure that the people that live in your zone also prosper?
Because I fundamentally believe in the premise of the law that if we are bringing vast amounts of capital into these zones, that low-cost equity is in and of itself going to benefit the people that live in these zones. It's going to benefit it through the built environment. It's going to benefit them through being entrepreneurs themselves that can go and access this access this equity. I believe that will fundamentally help and change these zones.
Okay.
It's not going to be popular with everybody, but I'm sticking with it.
You know, and I'm telling you guys, this is the kind of panel we need everywhere in America so that people have candid conversations and we can create understanding. I value your opinion and appreciate it. Ann?
I think that organizations, for-profits, social enterprises, whatever they may be, need to have a greater commitment to the stakeholders in their communities. I'm not suggesting stakeholder governance because I think that is fraught with problems in terms of being accountable to many principles, providing managers with, an opportunity to basically justify any action that they want. That being said, the scale at which we govern is changing. As it was mentioned last night in the panel, cities are, greater in size, more powerful economically, they need to move faster. All this means is that, the fact that our governments are not as responsive to people is not a bug, but a feature. It's just a part of the new reality of the size of our cities. And so I think community benefits agreements are something that, help to fill that, democratic deficit. And they're really important for that reason. Now, whether it's a community benefits agreement or whether it is increased fiduciary duties on the part of the managers in an organization, it doesn't matter to me what form it takes. I think that some cities are doing really interesting stuff. San Francisco and LA have programs where they are providing incentives to organizations that are formed as, for example, benefit corporations or somehow otherwise sustainably organized, whether that's a commitment to their employees or the environment. They are providing incentives in the form of when they contract with the city, they are automatically considered to have a lower bid than another organization that is formed just as a straight up, for-profit LLC or something like that. That's another way that you can get that stakeholder.
So Ann,
Yeah.
you're the mayor of Detroit.
Yep.
I'll tell Mayor Dugan before you return that you're in charge now.
Yep.
What 3 things would you do to make sure that the balance between the investment, investors, the developer, and the community benefits?
I would put in place maybe a tax credit for organizations that are pursuing development as a benefit corporation or as an L3C. Improve our community benefits ordinance. It's not perfect. And I'll get back to you on the third one.
Okay.
I got one.
Nia, you're the mayor now. I won't tell the 2 finalists who are running for re-election, but what would you do? Okay, investor, developer, and community benefits.
Okay. I guess let me start from here. I did a presentation once, and this is probably what helped get me the job that I do have. I talked about the I don't know if it's an analogy or the saying, if you teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a day. If you teach a man, if you give a man if you teach him to fish, he'll eat for a day. If you give him a fishing pole, what's the saying go?
Yeah, I know.
Right. It literally just dropped out of my head. You know what I'm saying? All right.
Yeah, I'm country too. I heard that one.
Yeah. So, and it normally just stops there at, giving a man a fish and teaching him to fish. No one, and I guess this kind of goes in line with what we're here today for, no one has ever said, how can I help this man build a ship? And with this ship, how can this man create jobs? And now that I have a ship, how many families can I eat besides just my mouth and my family's mouth? And I was giving this example to try to make a point around a sales tax that the community was pushing for. And I went and I studied it, and I said, okay, here's what we can really, really do with this thing. And it came from because usually we go from the top down, and I was like, I want to start from the bottom up. I want to build ships because a rising tide raises all ships. And if the rising tide is, opportunity zones, investments, gentrification, displacement, if I don't have a ship, I will drown. And that tide will wash me away. And it's great when floods happen and they come in and once they're done and how we rebuild. But if there's no one there to rebuild with, like if there's Game of Thrones fans out there, I'm not trying to be the woman on the dragon who just burnt down the whole city. Save the city. Save the people, regardless of who they love. They follow their leaders. So how do I build these ships? So what I would do is ships are the things that I can own. It's ownership. It's entrepreneurship. It's home ownership. Those things that create jobs. Those things that benefit from jobs. And so I would really begin to invest in, the small businesses and the people who are already in the community and working from the bottom up because I know if I can get them right, everything will fall in line. Because investors and development is attracted to places that are attractive. So if I'm able to clean up where I am and make it attractive, they will come. And if I'm there and I build up the people there, then they won't get pushed out. And then it makes more sense, when he's bringing these projects in because he's not pushing us out. So I would go from a bottom up approach, focusing on the people, building the ships. I guess is the simplest way I can say it.
So we're going to turn to the audience now. I think we have a microphone right here.
They can take mine.
They can take. Oh no. Mal, we have a microphone here, and we have a question here, Mallory. And I know there's elected officials in here. I'm a former elected.
I'm one.
So we're going to ask a question.
All right. So my name is Mike Elliott. I'm mayor of a city called Brooklyn Center in Minnesota. Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah. So we have an opportunity zone, Right now we have about 35 acres. And before my election, we had a developer who was slated to develop on this piece of property, nice, $1,700 a month, single one-bedroom apartments, and then they kind of go up from there. But obviously, our community, we have one of the lower average incomes, household incomes in the area. So I've been really struggling with this idea about building something that folks in my community cannot afford. And thinking about ways to make sure that if we're, and our EDA owns the land, our city owns the land.
Mayor, I hate to do this. What's your question?
So my question is,
Okay.
how do we make sure that our people are benefiting from whatever happens here? And then the second part is, what is the timeline for Opportunity Zone? Because, I heard you say, well, we're just in the early stages, but there is a timeline.
Yes.
Right? So we don't want to miss out on the opportunity and kind of let this thing go on.
Thank you, Mayor. Timelines, and you
So
can,
I'll hit the timeline component, but the biggest benefit will be seen for investments that were made in 2018 and 2019. If you do not invest into the fund in 2019 and you instead invested in 1/1/20, then you cannot get the extra 5% step up in basis, and you've obviously also lost 1 year of deferral. So we purposely sort of created the program that this is a wasting investment. It's getting slightly less powerful every day. It was meant to move and make people move so that we couldn't just sit on our hands, right? So to the end part, what you're probably hearing from sort of the developer or others is they greatly want to move now because their investors are telling them that now is the time to go on it, right? Your first question though is the hardest one, right? The affordable housing component of sort of how do you do that? And the only thing I would say is that you are in control with the fact that you as the city or through your EDA own this, and so you can restrict the transfer in some way to put in the community benefits or the affordable housing components or otherwise in that. What I would generally sort of, without knowing the pro forma and the deal though, be careful in that because this is a great incentive, but it's a relatively shallow incentive. We're not truly talking about affordable housing tax credits, right? Where almost 100% of the project can be paid for with the tax credit. We have a subsidy in the deal of maybe 10 to 15% if you want to look at it like that. So there's a weighing that can happen there of, for that 10 to 15% of OZ, can you sort of extract some more affordable housing out of it? Probably. But I think that's the question you have to go through and weigh and use and come to as a policymaker.
And I'll just add to the timeline component because I think on the one hand, with the opportunity zones, the benefit is greater the sooner that there is investment. From the community benefits perspective, that time has a countervailing consideration in the sense that time is what communities have sometimes, especially when they're underinvested, and that's what gives them leverage in the bargaining process. One of the biggest flaws with Detroit's community benefits ordinance is that it is time limited to 6 months, and so developers can just say, okay, well, we're going to wait for this process to go, and we'll meet our requirements, and then in 6 months the process will be over. That completely undercuts the community's power. And so from the perspective of actually making sure that the community has leverage in actually negotiating with developers, the community benefits agreements that have been most successful, like the Staples Center in LA, are actually where there's uncertainty as to whether or not the community will grant their approval that's necessary for the project to go forward with the city. And so there's time can play the other way in terms of the success of the equity aspect.
okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Tim Mahalik, Mayor of the City of Hartford, Wisconsin, Washington County Supervisor. This is, to Nia, just a comment on what you had mentioned, and that is making your saying gender specific, which in Wisconsin is really true. If you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach a man to fish, he's got to buy new fishing equipment, a boat motor and trailer, and a new pickup truck to pull it with. So
Thank you for clearing that up.
absolutely, no problem. My question is for Clarence. If you wanted to look through the lens of a municipality, what are the first steps that the league can help with as regards to ABC? What specifically would you say as far as setting up an opportunity zone?
Well, I think that from the role of a National League of Cities or Minnesota League of Cities, it's our role to educate our members, educate elected officials and staff members on this opportunity that's been created. Whether you agree with the policy and how it was developed and that there wasn't congressional hearings, that's fine, but it's here. And we need to figure out how we take advantage of this opportunity to get these investments while also figuring out how the community benefits plans are developed. And we do know, Mayor, all of America in cities, especially large cities, displacement and gentrification is occurring without opportunity zones. Affordable housing challenges in Washington, D.C., where I am living now, people who have been there for 20, 30 years are being moved out of these communities. So I think the community investment piece, attracting investment, and educating elected officials with the tools that these three panelists are talking about is key. The bottom line is it's law, and we got to figure out if we want to participate or not, but it's an opportunity to use the words of the act. Any other question? Here's, yes.
Just one quick question.
Yes.
Again, I want to say thank you for your candidness, Mr. Maxwell, because too often people don't tell the truth. So what my question is to reiterate the conversation as to why opportunity zones were created and the law was passed in the first place. What was the mission and what was the conversation in Congress around opportunity zones? Because oftentimes when we forget how we got here, how do we know where we're supposed to go?
So who wants to, you know, I know a little bit, but you guys are the experts. I'm just a moderator.
If I had the slides, I'd have them in my normal presentation, but there's some really great work that EIG did a few years ago, and it basically shows a graph, and it shows of business formation and capital formation in different census tracts across America, and it broke them down into prosperous census tracts to distressed census tracts, right? And you take it all the way back till before, not the Great Recession, but the recession before, back to 2000. And what you essentially see is all wealth in America has been created in the prosperous census tracts, right? Every other of these different 5 groups of census tracts are either holding serve or going down over a period of 20 years. And so I think the general thesis of the law was that what we need to do is instead for these distressed census tracts and otherwise to try a different course, let's try to flood them with capital and see what happens.
And I would think the basic concept as well was to get investments happening in communities that had not received investments before. That was the initial concept. So we got one more question here. Where's the microphone?
I'll just talk really loud.
All right, and Evan, we started 5 minutes late, so come on up. You can give him the microphone. So we want to steal it's actually 6 minutes, and because you took up 2 of our minutes with the intro.
Well, you mentioned, do we still want to do these? From my understanding, the opportunity zones were chosen, and if you weren't chosen, you're done, right? Is that right, or am I wrong on that?
Correct. Unless there's an act of Congress, the map is not changing. So
Right.
the map, the governors of each state and territory has got to pick them, lots of times with local input through it. But the map is now set, and it takes an act of Congress to change the map.
Got 8,700 in America right now. Go ahead.
I was wondering if you're already existing business owner with property in an
Who are you?
opportunity
State your name
zone.
again.
Terry Epps, City of Pine Lawn,
Yes.
Missouri. If you're already existing business owner in a opportunity zone area, can you still benefit from being an opportunity zone?
Yes,
Invest into that.
it's not easy, It actually, Nia said it well earlier, that it's easiest with sort of new startup ventures out there. But yes, we can structure it for existing businesses that are expanding and investing, or we can create, sort of ABC Business 1. We can go create ABC Business 2 and sort of allow that entrepreneur or that president or that business owner to access this low-cost equity.
Let's give our panel a hand for a great job. I think, cut the music. I don't want my walk-off music yet. I'm sincere about this because I do think sometimes we can get caught up as policy leaders and business leaders, staff, on being critical of what is in place or provided. As we look at the commitments model and what we want to see happen through our partnership with Kaufman and Schmidt and others, it's about bringing us together to think about how we can be creative and break down some of the barriers and the challenges and get beyond some of the fraction that is occurring at the federal level. City leaders, you don't have time to debate, Democrat, Republican, and who's delivering what. We got to come together like we're doing with Kaufman here and come up with solutions and make sure, I believe in what Nia is saying, that the people that are impacted most in the most difficult communities is what we have to work for, that don't have that voice. We got to dig deep to make sure that those businesses are participating and that the equity and the investors also get a return on their investment. We can do both, and I want to challenge everybody here to make sure that we do that. Thank you all so much. Appreciate your time.